Glad you could join us today on Earthfile. Welcome to the program. I'm Ayola Kasim. As oceans warm due to climate change, scientists are trying to predict how marine animals from backbone fish to spineless jellyfish will react. However, while the experiments are ongoing, there are indications that climate change is shrinking the breathable ranges of marine animals. Some scientists warned last September that since warmer waters will harbor less oxygen, some stretches of ocean that are breathable today for a given species may not be in the future. We'll take a look at what is causing the rise in temperature and what some are doing to reverse it. Just stay with us. During some summers, as the Caribbean water temperatures climb, the luminous coral colonies of gold, green and blue that ring the island nation of Cuba give way to patches of skeletal white. The technicolor streaks of darting tropical fish flash less frequently, while the rasping sounds of lobsters go quiet. Cuba's marine life has suffered from overfishing and pollution. There is mounting evidence that the warming of waters due to climate change may be taking a large toll as well, both off the island's coast and globally. Research published on Monday, the 5th of April 2021, finds that the total number of open water species declined by about half in the 40 years up to 2010 in tropical marine zones worldwide. During that time, sea surface temperatures in the tropics rose nearly 0.2 degrees Celsius.
And I think that is something that's concerning because the time period that they're looking at is actually not that long. I mean, if you're looking at geological history where biodiversity patterns or species evolution is taking place and biodiversity changes are taking place. So in a geological history, this is a blimp. So it's just a wink of an eye. And to see such rapid changes or such changes occurring so rapidly is something that's astonishing, I would say.
While numerous factors like overfishing have impacted tropical species, the study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found a strong correlation between species decline and rising temperature. Fish species diversity tended to either plateau or decline at or above 20 degrees Celsius. While past studies have shown that ocean warming is driving some species to migrate to cooler waters, the new study attempts to gauge that impact more broadly. Analyzing data on 48,661 marine species, including fish, mollusks, birds, and corals, since 1955, the scientists reached the conclusion that warming waters have driven thousands of ocean species poleward from the equator, threatening marine ecosystems and the livelihoods of people who depend on them.
Among reef scientists or people that are working in tropical systems, that's one of the big questions. Will coral reefs as ecosystems and corals as species be able to move north or southward fast enough to adjust to a changing climate? We do see range extensions. We do see reefs popping up in northern locations where they haven't been before, such as Japan. So there is a poleward shift in reef species, but the question is that really happening fast enough to adjust to a changing climate?
Poleward migration was more pronounced north of the equator, where oceans have warmed more quickly than in the southern hemisphere. It is also more prevalent among open water fish than so-called benthic species living on the ocean floor. The number of species attached to the sea floor, including corals and sponges, remained somewhat stable in the tropics between the 1970s and 2010. Some were also found beyond the tropics, suggesting they had expanded their ranges. In other words, scientists say species that can move are moving. For fixed species like corals, moving is not an option. Marine life in tropical waters declines when annual average sea temperature rises above 2 to 25 degrees Celsius, depending on the species, the study found. Authors of the study say the missing tropical species are likely following their thermal habitat as subtropical waters warm. Fossil records show that the same thing happened 140,000 years ago, the last time global surface temperatures were as hot as they are now.
I think the really interesting thing about this paper is that it's a very, very broad study of very large numbers of species. It shows the general trend of what's going on, but it also motivates us to know the details. It is going to matter. The details are going to matter because some species are much more valuable to us than others. And there's a worry that we'll lose species that are important to us. And then the sort of whole food web gets out of whack. And that can lead to changes which are sometimes not welcome. Yeah. It's complicated, and always we need more data. But I think this study very importantly shows that we need to be paying attention to these changes. And reducing climate change. I mean, what we're doing to the planet is causing an enormous amount of disruption in all sorts of ways. And I think we have to get a handle on that.
Having fleet of fish and other swimmers shift rapidly to more temperate waters could devastate the coral ecosystems they leave behind, along with any fishing and tourism industries that rely on them. Impact on commercial fish stocks in the tropics is not addressed either, though it is clear which part of the world will be hit the hardest. It is believed that Indonesia and other nations near the equator, such as in West Africa, have the most to lose because their stocks can only decrease.
In this study, we looked into the distribution of marine biodiversity across latitudes, and we found that there is a dip at the equator in the diversity of marine species. And when we compared this gradient in 3 different time periods, we found that almost all the marine species have moving away from the equator, and they are accumulating in the subtropics, and that's where we have higher peak in the species diversity. This kind of peak and the dip has changed over time, and there is northward shift in the northern hemisphere, which is very significant, and that also relates to the higher pace of climate warming since 1980s.
For Cuba, such an impact could unravel the island nation's efforts to manage its underwater gardens, though its corals have been less stressed by coastal development and pollution than corals elsewhere. They are considered more resilient to ocean warming. Cuba opened its first coral reef nursery 4 years ago to research which species coped best with warming and eventually to repopulate depleted reefs. The country is also restoring coastal mangroves, which serves as fish nurseries and shelter. Meanwhile, in a remote area of the western Indian Ocean, a team of scientists are carrying out a detailed survey with whales playing a vital part in the assessment of marine life on a 2,000 kilometers underwater ridge. The scientists are on a month-long quest to document whales and other marine mammals living around the Mascarene Plateau, hoping to bolster arguments for protecting the remote 2,000 kilometers underwater ridge to both fight climate change and protect ocean wildlife.
Well, Saida Mala is very poorly studied. Very little is known about the animals that live and feed here. So any information on the distribution of animals is really important. So we have a visual survey going on when it's daylight hours, but all the time, 24 hours a day, we're doing an acoustic survey as well. An acoustic survey can tell us about things that we miss that when we're doing the sightings that are below the surface, because most of the time marine mammals are below the surface. So we can hear them during the day, but also at night.
After 2 weeks of the month-long study, no whales had come within range of the team on board the Greenpeace research ship, Arctic Sunrise. Then, an underwater microphone picked up a series of unmistakable clicks and squeaks. A large pod of endangered whales was nearby and thought to be feeding.
We're talking about maybe 12 to 15 whales, I think. And there could be whales that are further away that we're not hearing as well. It's obviously a good area for them because we're hearing the occasional creak, so that shows that they're actually feeding here.
For sperm whales, the largest of the toothed whale species, the only data from this area comes from the whaling days. The group hopes also to draw attention to the United Nations campaign aimed at persuading countries to protect at least 30% of the planet's land and ocean by 2030.
I think it's really exciting. I mean, I didn't think 6 months ago that I'd be able to visit such an area, and the fact that we heard so many sperm whales, we've seen Bryde's whales today, and just being able to monitor this area, it feels like a real privilege because we're actually generating some of the first baseline data for this area on marine megafauna, and that feels quite exciting because it means that researchers in future can come back to the area and monitor change. And without some of this real pioneering baseline research, we're not able to do that. And we know that the oceans are undergoing profound changes throughout the world, and it's this baseline research that allows us to monitor these changes and understand how best to protect them.
The plateau is a conservation target partly for the vast seagrass meadow. Carpeting it sail the Mala Bank, which absorbs climate-warming carbon dioxide and provides vast wildlife habitats. Whales, meanwhile, are also key to combating global warming. They release tons of iron a year in their feces, which feeds carbon dioxide-absorbing phytoplankton. Using a hydrophone, a combination of different microphones designed to be used underwater, Tim Lewis, who is running the acoustic surveys on the Greenpeace voyage, detects a range of frequencies from as far as 350 meters behind the ship that lets him monitor the sounds of the ocean with a passive acoustic monitoring technology. The crew of the Greenpeace ship, Arctic Sunrise, also scans the vast ocean horizon through binoculars for evidence of life, while also sampling water for future DNA testing to determine which species frequent the plateau.
And we're targeting vertebrates because these are indicators of ocean health. So vertebrates very often occupy higher trophic levels, and the structure of that food web, the structure of the trophic levels, tells us a lot about the habitat, the ecosystem, and how healthy the ocean is in this particular area.
3 days after the team eavesdropped on the sperm whales hunting squid, the ocean became glassy flat. Watchers on the bridge spotted a burst of spray. A lone sperm whale was plowing through the sunlit waters. It raised its distinctive V-notched tail toward the sky before disappearing back into the depths. The masculine research is timely. A March 17 study in the journal Nature maps out marine areas teeming with life as conservation targets and suggests that guarding these zones against fishing, shipping, mining, and other human interference would protect more than 80% of endangered marine species habitats. It would also increase global fish catches by more than 8 million tons. Most of the target areas are within nations' territorial waters, but a few, like the mascarene, are in international waters.
These days, with all these different sort of much more industrial activities in the oceans, we have to be really careful that these species are able to recover from the whaling that they faced a couple of hundred years ago. And that's why these really strong ocean protection treaty can help in that if we design well managed and well connected marine protected areas, we're able to cover large areas of the ocean for certain species that may well be migratory, and we need them to be protected both in their breeding areas but also in their feeding areas. And so we need to think about the ocean with a much more holistic view and think about marine protection as a global issue rather than only protecting small areas that may well only protect part of their life cycle.
Protecting the mascarene, which is larger than the Green Barrier Reef, would help safeguard fisheries more than 2,000 kilometers away in East Africa, another group of researchers argued in a 2019 study in the journal Marine Policy. The United Nations has been working to broker deals on protecting both international and territorial waters. But the coronavirus pandemic has frustrated both sets of negotiations and has twice delayed the United Nations Biodiversity Conference, now set for October in China. Young Mauritian marine scientist and activist Shama Sandoye put on her flippers as she prepares for the first underwater climate strike in a remote stretch of the western Indian Ocean. Shama dives into the water at the Saya de Mala Bank, which is home to the world's largest seagrass meadow, in a bid to draw attention to the danger of global warming and rising seas. The seagrass meadow at the Saya de Malha Bank has become a priority for conservation because of its key role in absorbing climate-warming carbon dioxide. The world is losing some 7% of its seagrass cover per year due to dredging and rising ocean temperatures.
So I'm doing the first underwater climate strike at the Saya de Mala to raise awareness about its seagrass ecosystem. So it's the largest one and it stores carbon, so it's our biggest tool against the climate crisis.
The ship left the Seychelles on the 2nd of March for its first expedition to the Saya de Mala Bank seagrass meadow, which is a leading candidate to be one of the first high seas marine protected areas to be established under the Global Ocean Treaty. Thousands of marine species rely on the stretch of seagrass for food and habitat.
Well, I think the climate strike, the underwater climate strike, is very important for me because it raises awareness about the different marine ecosystems, especially here at the Saya de Mala. So basically the Saya de Mala is composed of mainly the seagrass. So the seagrass, they capture the carbon from the atmosphere and they store it. So that's a huge part of the Saya de Mala. So basically striking underwater means that we're demanding climate actions, strong climate actions, which includes protecting this huge area because this seagrass ecosystem, they can act as a tool against the climate crisis.
The campaign also hopes to draw attention to the United Nations goal of persuading countries to protect at least 30% of the planet's land and ocean by 2030, an interim target that many scientists say must be made to address the dual crisis of climate change and biodiversity loss. For Shama, the Saya de Mala is part of her home. The island nation of Mauritius shares jurisdiction over the surrounding seabed with the Seychelles.
It was a bit difficult because it's still the high seas and the water is not very calm, so it's choppy. But I feel that we had to do it, and with the help of the crew members and the Greenpeace team, we were capable of doing it. It was very difficult to do because, again, we're in the high seas and it's not extremely shallow either. But yeah, it was very important for us. So everyone came together to do it. That was really nice.
But while the remoteness of the seagrass fields, which are situated hundreds of miles from shore, has provided some protection so far, Shama worries this could change if oceans become busier and more polluted. Shipping traffic increased fourfold between 1992 and 2012, with much of that passing through the Indian Ocean. That's according to a 2014 study in Geophysical Research Letters. Meanwhile, Mauritius is still grappling with its worst ever ecological disaster caused by a Japanese ship that hit a coral reef and spilled some 1,000 tons of oil into aquamarine waters that then washed up onto beaches in July last year. Against the backdrop of such events, Sharma said she felt compelled as a teenager to become an activist.
The ocean covers like a huge part of the planet, and I think that there is a lot of life in the ocean that we don't know and that exists, which is magical, and I think that they shouldn't be suffering because of the decisions that other people are making. And I think that this life is pretty special to have it here on this planet, and yeah, I really think that the ocean doesn't only play a huge part in biodiversity, in the climate, but also it's important for the local communities, for islands like Mauritius, for example, like for our fishermen and so on. So for me, ocean protection alongside the local communities plays a huge role into the ecology, and I think that it's important we talk about it.
The oceans, which cover 3/4 of the Earth's surface, play a vital role in the global climate system, generating oxygen and absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Today, more than 3.5 billion people depend on the oceans for their primary source of food, and an estimated 40 million people worldwide are employed directly by the $21 trillion ocean economy. Every day, our oceans contribute to poverty eradication, promote sustainable livelihoods and employment, as well as improve global food security and human health. They are also the primary regulator of the global climate and a vital sink for greenhouse gases. Despite their importance, oceans, seas, and marine resources are increasingly threatened, degraded, or destroyed by human activities, reducing their ability to provide crucial ecosystem services. Plastic waste alone kills up to 1 million seabirds, 100,000 sea mammals, and countless fish each year. Oceans also absorb about 30% of the carbon dioxide produced by humans, but there has been a 26% rise in ocean acidification since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Marine pollution, an overwhelming majority of which comes from land-based sources, is reaching alarming levels, with an average of 13,000 pieces of plastic litter to be found on every square kilometer of ocean. Moreover, death and disease caused by polluted coastal waters costs the global economy some $7.2 billion. Some 30% of the world's fish stocks are overexploited, reaching below the level at which they can produce sustainable yields.
We have showcased the impact of all these activities on the marine life. And it also comes back to us because our livelihoods are dependent on these marine lives. Our health is dependent on this marine life. If the ocean that houses these resources that we depend on is not being taken care of, we are actually shooting ourselves in the leg.
The problems affecting the ocean are bad news for the 3 billion people who rely on fish from marine and inland fisheries as an important part of their diet, and more than 520 million more who rely on fishing-related activities for income and food. Worldwide, about 1.3 billion people live in coastal tropical areas, many of which rely on fisheries for food. It is estimated that the maximum catch potential of tropical fish stocks in so-called exclusive economic zones will decline by 40%. That's within the mid-century if global warming continues unabated. This simply means more people will fall into poverty if warming is not curbed. That's our show for the week. Thank you for watching. From me, Ayola Kasim, and the Earthfile crew here in Lagos, it's bye for now.